to final customers are not included in the scope. That's clear. So we're talking about wholesale traded contracts.
Okay.
The other question was, how would regulators or Acer be able to say whether price spikes are artificial or not? Well, indeed, this needs a sort of a level of quite high level of understanding of what went on markets. This is also the reason why these enhanced data reporting requirements will be part of our proposal. So first of all, market monitors and / regulators will have to see who transacted, at what price, at what times, in which products. This is one side of the story. The other side of the story, that market misconduct, so abuses or insider transactions on traded electricity and gas markets, will often relate to information on electricity and gas production, storage or transportation capacities. Yeah? So it has to do with the physics, and therefore Acer will also have or will get an access to fundamental type of detailed fundamental type of information, i.e. information on supply and demand from trading participants. So putting these words together, the use of the physics, the infrastructure, and seeing the transactions happening at the same time will enable the market monitor to say what caused spikes.
Yeah, and I think this is an important point just to add on is here is that what Acer and the regulators bring to the table, and this is why it's appropriate to have such a monitoring function at Acer, is a deep understanding, not just of the physics of electricity systems across Europe, but also of the developments on markets. Obviously, this is what requires expertise to judge what is behind any price rises and whether anybody has engaged in manipulation here. We have a question then on the clarification on the definition of market manipulation, and quotes the regulation where it is making, among the definitions of market manipulation, is making it appear that the availability of generation capacity or gas availability or the availability of transmission capacity, and other than that the capacity is actually physically available, constitutes market manipulation. And the question is, does this include holding transport capacity, i.e. booking it and not using it? But first of all, I just want to say that we are working very hard on good congestion management and capacity allocation guidelines separately in gas, so hopefully we can prevent any of these things happening here. But of course, if you were engaging in manipulating prices through the use of capacity or the booking of capacity, or making it appear that capacity wasn't available where it truly was, then of course that could constitute market manipulation. So I mean, we'd have to get into a definition of holding transport capacity to discuss this in more detail, but I do consider that what might often be described as hoarding would constitute market manipulation.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Maybe in the meantime, because I think this sort of deserves more clarification on the coverage of whether physical products and
now we have a question in from Stuart exactly on this question.
Okay, so to bring clarity here, the prohibitions are on market abuses. Yeah, market abuses as defined in our regulation, being trading on inside information and market manipulation. So these prohibitions apply to wholesale energy products, and this is the wording, to which the provisions of the Market Abuse Directive don't apply to, i.e. products that are not commodity derivatives in the meaning of the financial regulation. The prohibitions don't apply to these instruments. Where we do concern, where the provisions, the rest of the remit provisions apply to commodity derivatives, is then the monitoring of the wholesale market transactions. We do say that in order to be able to understand whether whole market abuses had happened, you will need to have access to the entirety of wholesale energy transactions, including spot and derivative transactions, irrespective whether some instruments are falling under the financial regulation or not. This will have to be put together in a totality view, if you want, and this is the reason why Acer would also want to will have to get access to derivative transactions which may fall under reporting obligations of financial legislation.
And just another point on the, well, it's popped away on that question about what's covered by MAD and MIFID. I think it's quite an important point that that large parts of financial instruments, of what are of the energy market, are not financial instruments within the meaning of the Market Abuse Directive and are therefore not covered. Large parts of what are of concern with wholesale energy markets are not under the remit, if you could excuse me, of MIFID and are not reported. This is based on, among other things, the report that we requested from, the advice we requested from energy regulators and financial regulators. This is in the was given to us at the beginning of 2009, the Caesar Ergeg report. If you read the background information, there are links to this report which clearly point out where there are gaps both in the coverage of prohibitions of market abuse and in the reporting of data. And this is very important, and what we have done here is to ensure that these gaps do not persist. Isabella has a question.
Yes, this is on whether a long-term contracts or index-linked contracts are covered. I would say in general, yes. Here we need to say whether the trading decisions that are made or not made on the market or are based on inside information, or whether that transactions involve the definitions on the market manipulation, so i.e. making appear that capacities are available or not available relating to these indexed or long-term wholesale products. To work that out in more detail from this abstraction is of course difficult. I think these are the elements that will have to be looked when the application of this regulation comes.
I think it's, I mean, you can understand maybe reluctance to, on a 3-line description of a trade, why you could say it would be difficult to say that meets the criteria set out in the regulation. I mean, I think the principle goes, if you are manipulating prices and you're benefiting from it, or if you're attempting to manipulate prices to your benefit, and that can constitute market manipulation. I don't want to say that exactly what you've described there meets the tests, because we'd have to. I think I've given you the answer.
Any additional questions to us?
There are no additional questions at this time. Okay, that's from the market. That's from the administrator. We have some information here that was handed out earlier this morning here in Brussels to some journalists, and it's talking about the development of traded volumes. We mentioned that we have something like 100 terawatt hours.
So we developed a few figures. I think we mentioned in the press release a total traded electricity volume of 10,000 terawatt hours.
Excuse me.
And we have less accurate figures for gas. We haven't been sort of be able to assess the entirety of the gas transactions, but we do have information from secondary sources that the traded gas markets have developed very well, especially in the last 2 years. So they have been now reaching similar levels and multiples for certain markets, especially the UK,
and
very unevenly distributed.
In the UK, it's actually higher in gas markets, and I think it's important that but then about a quarter of the markets are covered through power exchanges as we understand it now. The interactions with rules on centralised clearing. Centralised clearing is covered by the proposal from September 15th, if I recall correctly, from the Commission for a European Market Infrastructure Regulation, which sets out rules for data reporting for OTC derivatives and also for compulsory clearing for OTC derivatives. Directly they're not particularly related. What's most important though is that the information that is reported to trade repositories should facilitate the data collection exercise of Acer. Of course, this hasn't all been developed yet in its full detail, but we expect to see everybody working well together over the next number of months and getting good and efficient data reporting procedures in place, where we know there is actually quite a lot of support within industry here, and this is one of the things that we deliver quite well on for industry, is to have a effective and efficient data reporting system.
So there's an additional question on how the remit will tie in with the upcoming proposals in this financial sphere, i.e. the review of the MiFID and the Market Abuse Directive. Indeed, we mentioned these two regulations or directives. So what will happen in the review of the Market Abuse Directive, and I'm talking about a review process which has already started or has been going on for almost 1.5 years. I think one of the proposals that had been assessed was to enlarge the scope of the Market Abuse Directive so as to cover OTC derivative products. We are talking here, and of course energy can also be traded in form of derivatives. So if you have broker transactions in traded electricity and gas markets, and yes, we do have a lot of them, they will be covered by those enlarged or reviewed rules of the Market Abuse Directive. So there will be more markets, and hopefully at the end of the review process, and by the time when the remit is indeed adopted, have a full coverage of rules of all ends of these traded markets, both derivatives and non-derivative markets, including physical and spot transactions.
I mean, I think certainly it's not for us to prejudge exactly what will come out of the MAD review. And I don't think the question is so much about exemptions or otherwise from other changes that happen out of MiFID or not. What we're doing here is we're ensuring that the energy sector, which is or rather the gas and electricity sector, which is a sector where there are very clear concerns and very clear desires to set up a coherent framework across Europe for market oversight, can be implemented very well. Whether this addresses some concerns that might be in place in other commodities in MAD or MiFID is something that will be looked into, I'm sure, over the next while. What we have done here is address clear problems in the energy sector, and so we should be very, very strong, as we say, as we going forward, that we can have confidence, that consumers can have confidence, that policymakers can have confidence in price formation on energy markets.
Any more questions?
Okay, it's 2. We've been talking for about 45 minutes. We have more. No. Isabella again. No. Okay, I'll just say something here on this. The new transparency rules are important, something that we think is going to make a big difference to the effective operation